Today's topic is a bit of a rarity for this channel, in the sense that we'll be looking at an American route in Train Simulator Classic. The last US route I remember reviewing in this game was the Sacramento Northern, an interurban line in California. Thinking back to Illinois, the Racetrack, Aurora to Chicago, was developed by Chicago and Southwest Productions and released way back in August 2015, and I remember getting it as a birthday present 3 months later. Hard to believe that 2015 was 10 years ago. These days, the Aurora to Chicago route is still available on Steam for a full price of 48 New Zealand dollars. As the DLC title implies, the route coverage only runs from Chicago Union Station to Aurora, a distance of only 37 miles. As for motive power, the base route only includes one locomotive each for passenger and freight services respectively. The locomotives in question are the EMD F40PH-3 and GP38-2, with the latter supplied in 2 liveries. I think this route could have been improved if other Metra locomotives, such as the F40PHM-2 and MP36PH-3S, were included as well, instead of only getting the F40PH-3. In any case, you also get Nippon Sharyo gallery coaches to run with the F40, while the freight wagons are apparently recycled from the Stevens Pass route, but don't quote me on that. BNSF locomotives from other add-ons, such as the ES44DC that comes with Marias Pass, can be used in scenarios on the racetrack to make the rail scene feel a bit more realistic. You also get some very low poly versions of the Metra equipment, which can be used to populate the depot sidings without impacting performance too much. But the thing I don't like about this VLP stuff is that it is very poorly modelled, especially the locomotive. Meanwhile, you also get VLP versions of the Amtrak P42DC and Superliner coaches for use on AI traffic into and out of Chicago Union Station. When I was making my own scenarios on this route, I preferred to use the better looking P42DC and coaches from the Empire Builder add-on of January 2014. Metra trains run in a push-pull configuration, with the locomotive always facing Aurora and the cab car always facing Chicago. On the topic of these passenger trains, I'm disappointed by the inclusion of only the more modern gallery cars, which date back to 2002. Based on the real footage that I remember seeing, it's not uncommon for Metra trains to run with a mix of older and newer gallery cars, with the older ones having noticeably smaller windows. By default, the Metra rolling stock is unbranded, so you'll need to download a branding patch, to which I will include a link in the description. This add-on was released in the days when BNSF branding was only available to players in the US, so us lot who did not live stateside had to get a branding patch for this lot, but I can't remember where I got the patch from. On the topic of mods, I think FanRailer made some for this route a while back, but I don't know if they're still available. As for the default sounds, I always thought they were nothing special, particularly in the case of the Metra locomotive. If I'm not mistaken, this model was actually modified from, and uses the same audio as the original Amtrak F40PH add-on of October 2012. Meanwhile, I have little, if any, memory of the GP38-2's default sounds, and this thing is compatible with the sound pack from Searchlight Simulations. At the time of this video's production, in mid-November 2025, there is still a horn mod available for the Metra F40. The Metra F40PH-3 is not a particularly advanced locomotive where features are concerned, especially when compared to the Class 37 from Armstrong Powerhouse, or even the freeware Norfolk Southern AC44C6M from Switchpoint simulations. But she does at least have a working head-end power control switch in the cab. You can turn on HEP either by showing it a photograph of Sydney Sweeney or moving the dial to point towards the floor, after which the prime mover will rev up to full power in order to provide electricity for the coaches. The Metra locomotive and cab car also feature a functioning alerter of sorts, which goes off every 90 seconds if the controls are not moved, or it goes off when you exceed the speed limit by only 0.1 miles per hour, and I thought the scoring in career mode was sensitive. As far as I can tell, there is no way to turn the alerter thingy off, which can be quite annoying in situations when you feel like you have to break the speed limit in order to keep to a very tight timetable. The Racetrack, or to use Metra's name for it, the BNSF line, is the busiest line on Metra's network, although the schedule is geared more towards people travelling into the city in the morning and back home in the afternoon, as opposed to what they do in somewhere like Auckland, New Zealand, where they have consistent 20-minute headways in both directions throughout the day, and the frequency is increased to every 10 minutes at peak times. Stopping patterns on the Racetrack vary quite considerably, with some trains stopping at all stations and others running non-stop between Chicago and Downers Grove or Naperville, and other services even skip both Naperville and Route 59. On weekends, trains between Aurora and Chicago run on consistent 60-minute headways in each direction throughout the day, and it's also worth mentioning that some stations, namely Laverne, Congress Park, Stone Avenue, Highlands, and West Hinsdale don't get any weekend service at all. I've included a link to the BNSF line's timetable in the description for anyone who wants to have a look. There's too much detail in there for me to fully wrap my head around, let alone discuss it all in this video. For a significant portion of the route, the stations are much closer together than what I would expect from a normal US commuter line. In fact, they're so close together that they could give those stations on the London Underground and other European commuter networks a run for their money. But once you go past Downers Grove Main Street, on a journey out to Aurora, you'll notice that the stations are much further apart. The remaining stops past Downers Grove are Lisle, Belmont, Naperville, and Route 59. I always considered driving on this route to be a challenging experience, especially with the tight timetables and F40PH-3's poor acceleration. As for speed limits, it is 70 miles per hour for most of the route, and down to between 10 and 35 miles per hour at both ends. Personally, I find the arrival into and departure from Chicago Union Station to be rather tedious due to a long section where the speed limit is only 10 miles per hour. As for the scenery quality, it was decent by 2015 standards, but I don't know what to make of the overall job now. The Chicago skyline looks pretty good as far as I'm concerned, as does the station modelling throughout the route. Oddly enough, my favourite station is Highlands. As I got further out towards Aurora, I couldn't help thinking that the scenery looked a lot more basic, especially when you notice that there are numerous default Coogee-era assets reused on this route, for whatever reason. Meanwhile, there's a bit of questionable track laying outside Union Station, where you awkwardly jolt into a curve with super elevation. This reminds me of the Western Lines of Scotland route, particularly at the junction near Carlisle Canal engine shed. Quite frankly, I had no interest in revisiting the default scenarios for this review, out of preference for the Steam Workshop scenarios made by High Iron Simulations and other people. A while back, I tried my hand at making scenarios for the Aurora to Chicago route myself, but I haven't tried that for a few years now, partly because I found the process of placing static rolling stock in all the big yards to be rather tiresome, especially at Cicero. The old Racetrack scenarios that I made are still available to download from Steam Workshop, for anyone who might be curious to try them. In closing, I am of the opinion that the Aurora to Chicago route add-on for TS Classic has not aged all that well. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have any part of the Metra network in the game, but I think this add-on is let down by the complete lack of variety in the included Metra rolling stock, not to mention the mediocre scenery for a significant portion of the route and the lack of any other Metra lines, such as the North Central service to Antioch, or the Heritage Corridor to Joliet. In its current state, I think the add-on deserves a 5 out of 10, and I can't decide whether or not I would recommend it to other TS Classic players.